Hey guys, tonight we slip into the creaking, smoke-scented shadows of a medieval peasant's winter. You're not in your own bed right now. No memory foam, no central heating, not even a hot water bottle. Instead, you're crunching across frozen mud and straw, ducking into a cottage where the air bites as hard inside as out. Candles gutter. The wind rattles the shutters, and the only thing thicker than the frost on the window is the smell of damp wool, boiled turnip, and, let's be honest, something that might once have been a rat. You probably won't survive this, but that's what makes it fun, right? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Go ahead and post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge across a churned up path, boots heavy with mud, that will never dry until May. The sun has slid behind the horizon, and the world is blue and brittle. Your hands are numb, cheeks raw, and you can already feel the creeping ache in your bones, that warning that tonight will be colder than the last. Historians still argue whether the worst winters came in the Little Ice Age, or before, but there's no denying for you, the cold is absolute. You duck inside. The door a warped plank, the latch more hope than hardware. The room is low, ceilinged, stuffed with shadows. Smoke curls from a struggling fire in the middle of a dirt floor. There's no chimney, just a hole in the roof that lets out more heat than smoke. Hay and reeds are packed between the wall's timber, doing their best impression of insulation. You can count your breath in little cloudy puffs. Your family is already inside, bundled under layers of what passes for clothing, tunics, shawls, whatever could be patched together or bartered from a neighbor. The dog is curled near the fire, snoring and twitching in some dream about chasing the geese it'll never catch. A chicken hops up on the bench, eyeing a crumb. You can't blame it. It's as cold for them as it is for you. You glance at the ceiling, where icicles sometimes form on especially unlucky nights. No joke. There are records of frost building up Iancidy medieval houses. You imagine waking up with a stalactite dangling over your nose. You wouldn't put it past this place. The wind wails outside, sneaking through every crack. You tug your cloak tighter, but it's like wrapping yourself in disappointment. You'd consider another log on the fire, but the woodpile is a luxury. Most nights, you're burning whatever you can find: peat, dried dung, even bundles of sticks, scavenged from the lanes after the Lord's men have taken the best. Sometimes you wonder if the fire eats more hope than heat. You hear a story from your uncle. He claims he once survived a winter so cold his eyelids froze shut. Historians still debate whether that's possible or just an exaggeration, but you don't doubt him. After all, last winter the neighbor's well froze solid and everyone spent a week chipping ice just to make gruel. You scratch at your arm, wondering if it's a flea or just the wool. Medieval peasants didn't have the luxury of being picky. You share your bed with bugs, your air with smoke, and your nights with the howl of wolves in the forest. Oh, and the rats. Can't forget the rats. There's always one, bold as brass, darting across the hearth. Fun fact, some folks tried to ward them off with dried mint and old shoes. Historians still argue if this worked, but the rats probably appreciated the decor. Outside, the darkness is absolute. No streetlights, no cars. Just the moon and the stars, and the crunch of something moving in the hedge. You throw another damp stick on the fire, watch it hiss and spit, and settle in for the night. It's going to be a long one, but you're not alone. Every winter, every night, you and your fellow peasants grip hope with numb fingers and wait for the dawn. You're inside, but warmth is still a distant, tantalizing dream. The walls around you are thick, built from wattle and daub, a fancy term for a peasant's favorite recipe: woven sticks, smeared with a mixture of mud, straw, and sometimes, if you're feeling especially lucky, a dash of animal dung for that extra rustic touch. It's not exactly HGTV material, but it's what stands between you and a night of frostbite with a side of pneumonia. You run your hand along the bumps and ridges of the wall, feeling the cold radiate through, as if the night itself is trying to sneak in. Now, you might think a thatched roof would be cozy, but cozy is relative. Those bundles of dried reeds look picturesque from a distance, but up close they drip and leak, especially after heavy snow or rain. In fact, historians still argue whether thatched roofs were better at keeping out cold or letting in water. You know from experience, it's a toss-up. If it's not dripping on your head, it's probably because the wind has blown a hole somewhere else. You look up at that roof, a patchwork of old straw, moss, and the occasional bird's nest. On cold nights, you can hear the scurry of mice, nature's tenants, at will. And if you're unlucky, you'll find a soggy spot on your bedding in the morning. That's probably why you always sleep with your head tucked under a rough linen cloth. It's your medieval version of an umbrella, minus the waterproofing. The door isn't much more than a plank held together by stubbornness. Drafts slip through the gaps, carrying with them the smells of the night, damp earth, smoke, and sometimes, if the wind shifts, the scent of the communal dung heap. You pull your cloak tighter, but it's like trying to block Niagara Falls with a napkin. The floor is dirt, no tiles, no wood, just packed earth that turns to mud with every spill or leak. You've stuffed straw and rushes into the worst spots, hoping they'll absorb the chill. Every few weeks, your family sweeps out the old, filthy rushes and replaces them with fresh ones. It's a routine so universal that people joke about changing the rushes, like we joke about changing the sheets. Here's a quirky detail: some households would mix in aromatic herbs like lavender or pennyroyal to mask the other, less pleasant smells. Historians still argue how effective that really was. Did it actually help, or did it just make the rats more fragrant? As you settle in for the night, you notice the cracks between the timbers. Sometimes, when the wind really howls, you can see your own breath drifting toward the ceiling before it escapes through those gaps. You stuff bits of cloth or more straw into the holes, but it never seals completely. Medieval insulation is a constant losing battle, one that requires as much creativity as it does persistence. Your family gathers close to the fire, the only source of warmth. It's small, struggling, and surrounded by stones blackened from hundreds of smoky nights. There's no fireplace, just a shallow pit on the floor. The smoke curls up and out, mostly, but every now and then, a gust sends it back down to sting your eyes and make you cough. You know it's bad tonight when even the dog looks offended. You try not to think about the worst-case scenario, a fire in the night. Old thatch and dry beams are a perfect recipe for disaster, and everyone knows a family who's lost their home to flames. That's why you keep buckets of water and sand nearby, just in case. Though, truth be told, you'd need a miracle to put out a blaze once it starts. Historians still debate whether medieval peasants were more afraid of fire or frost, and honestly, it depends on which one you're facing at the moment. But there's an odd comfort in the shelter, imperfect as it is. The walls creak, the roof leaks, but it's your space. The family's ladder bounces off the mud and timber, and you find yourself grateful for even the smallest barrier between you and the night. You'd probably laugh too if you saw a modern home. So much glass, so little mud. Where's the fun in windows you can actually see through? Anyway, tonight the wind rattles the shutters again. You hear a distant owl and the closer, more ominous sound of a branch scraping against the roof. You're not sure if it's the wind or something else, but you're glad for every inch of wall between you and whatever's out there. And if it gets too cold, well, you still have a few tricks up your sleeve, though you might have to share them with the chickens. You shuffle to the corner where your bed should be, if you're lucky enough to have one. For most peasants, a bed is a generous way of describing a heap of straw covered with a battered, scratchy blanket. The straw isn't just for comfort, that would be too optimistic, but for insulation. You pull back the rough woolen blanket, revealing a layer of hay and rushes packed tightly together, forming a mattress that crackles every time you move. Let's talk about insulation, medieval style. Forget about double glazed windows or central heating. Your best friend is whatever you can stuff between yourself and the cold. Straw, hay, dried rushes, moss, even old clothes. If it traps air, it's fair game. You methodically arrange handfuls of straw around your sleeping spot, pressing it into the cracks where the floor meets the wall. The smell is earthy, a mix of grass and the faint whiff of last summer's sun. But there's also an itchiness that never quite goes away, and you can't help but wonder if it's the straw or the fleas. A hint, it's probably both. Though you remember that tale from the next village over, where someone tried to use seaweed as bedding. Supposedly, it was warmer, but the smell made it impossible to sleep. Historians still argue whether seaweed was ever a common peasant insulation trick, but you're not rushing to try it. You'd rather be cold than smell like a beached whale all winter. Now, you're not the only one making the best of what you have. Some nights, you hang woven mats of reeds on the walls, hoping they'll blunt the worst of the cold creeping through the mud and timber. The wealthiest peasants, think, has 2 cows, rich, might even have a tapestry or a heavy curtain to drape over a doorway. For the rest of you, it's layers of old sacks and patched-up cloaks nailed to the wall. It's not pretty, but it's better than nothing. You flop down on your hay mattress, pulling your cloak tight. As you settle in, you hear your little brother grumbling about itchy hay. You remind him, as you always do, that the itch means it's working. After all, if it's irritating your skin, it must be distracting you from the cold, right? That's medieval logic for you. Sometimes, the only thing keeping you warm is your own sense of humor. Here's a quirky fact: some people would sprinkle their bedding with dried mint or lavender to mask the musty smell and supposedly repel bugs. You wonder if it really works, or if it just gives the fleas a refreshing aftertaste. Historians still debate whether the herbal approach had any real effect, or if it was all in the mind. A kind of medieval placebo. Every so often, you have to change out the straw. The old stuff gets infested with bugs, or just turns into a compact, dirty mat that does nothing for warmth. You drag in a new bundle from the barn, shake it out, and spread it over the bed frame, or just the floor if you're not fancy. The process always kicks up a cloud of dust and bits of grass, making you sneeze and cough. If you're not careful, you'll be picking straw out of your hair for days. Tonight, you notice a mouse darting through the rushes. You sigh. Mice are the true lords of the medieval house, and your bed is their favorite playground. You try to ignore them, but you can't help glancing at the corner where last week you found a neat little stash of grain. At least they're tidy, you suppose. Sometimes you get creative with your insulation. On particularly brutal nights, you and your family pile up against the walls, using your own bodies as shields against the drafts. You pull whatever you have, blankets, cloaks, even old sacks, over everyone, creating a tangled, itchy, but marginally warmer heap of humanity. It's not glamorous, but survival rarely is. You listen to the wind rattling the roof, feeling the straw shift beneath you. It's not exactly a featherbed, but as you close your eyes, you're grateful for every prickly strand. You drift off, wondering if tomorrow you'll finally get around to patching that hole by the door, or if you'll just stuff another handful of hay in and call it a day. And as you settle into your makeshift nest, you can't help but smile at how little has changed. Sure, you might itch, sneeze, and occasionally share your bed with the local wildlife, but you're still here, warm-ish, alive, and ready to face another day. Or at least another night. You wrap another layer around yourself, a scratchy woolen tunic that's seen more winters than you can count. The art of survival here isn't just about brute strength or stubbornness. It's about layers. Layers upon layers, each one trapping a little more precious warmth next to your skin. You don't have a wardrobe bursting with choices, but you know how to make the most of what you've got. First comes the underlayer, usually linen if you're lucky. Linen breathes in the summer, but in winter, it's mostly there to keep the wool from itching you to madness. Over that goes your everyday tunic, thick with patches and memories of better days. Then another tunic, if you have one, maybe borrowed from an older sibling who's grown too tall. After that comes a heavy cloak, fastened with a wooden pin, or, if you're really fortunate, a bit of twisted cord. Sometimes you even wrap old rags around your arms and legs, stuffing bits of straw or moss into the gaps. You look less like a person and more like a walking haystack. But at least you're not shivering. Well, not as much. There's a certain pride in knowing how to layer. You've watched the older folk in the village mastering the technique, thin underthings, thick middle layers, and a final wrapping that blocks out the wind. It's a skill passed down like a secret family recipe, whispered in cold corners and demonstrated by example. Historians still argue whether peasants cared how they looked in all these layers, or if practicality always won. Judging by your own reflection in a bucket of water, fashion is definitely taking a back seat tonight. You glance at your feet, wrapped in strips of old cloth. Socks aren't really a thing for most peasants. Instead, you improvise. Some folks even stuff their shoes with straw, creating a peasant foot sauna that sounds fancier than it feels. It's effective to a point, but you have to change out the straw frequently. Otherwise, things get a little too organic. Your neighbor swears by moss, claiming it keeps his toes warmer, but you suspect he just likes the squishy feeling. Quirky fact break: in some regions, people wore animal pelts as outer layers for side-in. The logic? The fur traps air, and the skin blocks the wind. The downside? You smell like a wet dog when it thaws. Historians still debate if this was standard practice or just a creative solution for those who happened to trap a fox or two. You catch your breath as you remember last winter's cold snap, when the river froze solid and you wore every stitch of clothing you owned. You walked stiffly, like a knight in rusty armor, but you made it through. This year, you've added a new trick, wrapping a scarf around your face, leaving only your eyes exposed. It keeps your breath warm, but by morning you wake up with frozen droplets in your eyebrows. You joke with your siblings that you look like a bandit, until you remember that real bandits don't have to worry about frostbite. Layering isn't just for nighttime. You keep your outer cloak handy near the bed, ready to pull on if you need to venture out in the dark. Sometimes you need to check on the animals or fetch water, and the cold outside makes you appreciate the relative warmth inside, even if it's just a few degrees above freezing. You'd never admit it, but you sometimes envy the chickens for their feathers. They seem to take the cold better than you do, and they never have to worry about moths eating their best tunics. Sometimes you get creative with your layers. You remember the time you tied reeds around your knees, hoping it would keep the joints from aching. It worked for about 5 minutes, then just made walking impossible. Now you stick to tried and true methods, like wrapping a sack around your feet before bed. It's not glamorous, but at least it keeps the worst of the drafts away. Tonight, as you settle into your nest of blankets and straw, you're grateful for every layer, every patch, every scratchy thread. You wiggle your toes, feeling the warmth start to build. It's not much, but it's enough. You close your eyes, listening to the wind, and dream of a world where everyone has a feather bed, and maybe socks that don't scratch. You glance down at your feet, which are easily the coldest part of your body, now that night has settled in and the fire's just a stubborn glow. Shoes, if you have them, are sturdy leather, cracked and patched until they're more whole than shoe. But leather alone won't save your toes on a night like this, so you use what every medieval peasant knows: layering and stuffing. First, you wrap your feet in strips of old linen or wool, winding them around your toes and ankles like primitive socks. They're never quite tight enough to keep out all the cold, but they help. Over that, you cram straw into your shoes, a trick passed from one freezing sole to the next. The straw acts as insulation, holding on to what little heat your feet can muster and keeping the biting cold of the earth at bay. Sure, after a day or two the straw starts to break down and get a little smelly, but you've learned not to be picky. Medieval fashion tip: if your shoes aren't crunchy, you're not doing it right. You wriggle your toes, grateful for the extra layer, even as you feel the sharp ends of straw poking through the cloth. Some folks stuff moss or even dried leaves if straw isn't available, but nothing beats that first moment you slide your numb feet into a fresh batch of hay. You call it your peasant foot sauna. Just don't expect any spa treatments or cucumber water. Here's a quirky little footnote: in some regions, peasants experimented with stuffing their shoes with sheep's wool or even bits of rabbit fur. If they could scrounge some up, it was warmer, but the smell could knock over a horse. Historians still argue whether peasants bothered to clean their feet before bed, or if everyone just accepted stinky toes as a part of winter life. Given the general aroma of the medieval world, you suspect the latter. Of course, shoes weren't always an option. On especially cold nights, you sometimes go barefoot indoors, thick caluses protecting you from the worst of the chill. You tuck your feet under your legs, near the fire if there's room, or even slip them beneath the dog for a bit of borrowed warmth. The family dog doesn't complain anything. It's a fair trade for a few table scraps and a pat on the head. When it's truly frigid, you and your siblings share an old trick. You huddle together, feet to feet, sharing warmth as best you can. It's not glamorous, but it works. You joke that you're inventing the world's first heated mattress, powered by sibling complaints and the occasional well-placed elbow. But sometimes, despite your best efforts, nothing seems to help. On those nights, you're forced to get creative. You recall the story of old Mags from down the lane, who swore by sleeping with hot stones wrapped in cloth at her feet. She'd heat them by the fire, then tuck them into bed before climbing in. It worked until the night she forgot to wrap the stone properly and burned a hole straight through her straw mattress. Historians still debate whether this was a common hazard or just proof that Mags was a little too enthusiastic. Your own toes throb, half asleep with cold. You flex them, trying to coax some feeling back, and distract yourself by listening to the wind. It howls against the door, rattling the latch. You imagine what it would be like to have proper woolen socks, the kind spun by the lord's wife or the village weaver. They say those socks are so thick you could stank in a snowdrift and not feel a thing. But for now, you settle for your crunchy, straw-stuffed shoes and the warmth of your own not-so-fresh feet. Every so often, you check the fire, nudging it with a stick to coax a little more heat. The embers glow, casting long shadows on the walls. It's a nightly ritual, one that everyone in the family knows by heart. You take turns tending the fire, making sure it doesn't die out before morning. If it does, you'll wake up to ice on the inside of the walls and a day spent trying to coax life back into the hearth. You'd rather not risk it. Tonight, as you finally settle your feet into a bearable position, you remind yourself that this is just another winter night. One of many. You've survived worse, and with any luck, you'll survive this one too. You close your eyes, listening to the quiet, and let the warmth, such as it is, creep up from your toes. You're not about to sleep alone tonight. Not because you're afraid of goblins, okay, maybe just a little, but because in the medieval world, sharing a bed is as natural as sharing a loaf of bread. Space is precious, warmth even more so, and privacy. Well, that's a word for the nobility, not for you and your family. You look around at your sleeping arrangements. The big bed is a generous term for a wooden frame, sagging with years of use, and a rumpled pile of scratchy blankets and straw. Everyone piles in, parents at the sides, children in the middle, and sometimes even a grandparent or two squeezed in for good measure. You take your spot, wedged between a sibling who snores and one who, no matter how many times you complain, insists on stealing the covers. It's a nightly shuffle, a dance of elbows and knees, and whispered complaints. The first few minutes are always a battle for territory. Someone's cold feet find your calves, someone else's arm ends up across your face. But once you settle, there's a strange comfort to the chaos. The collective warmth of 5 or 6 bodies pressed together is better than anything a lone blanket could offer. You joke with your older brother that it's like sleeping in a pile of firewood, only itchier and occasionally louder. He grins and claims at least firewood doesn't kick you in its sleep. You both know that, come morning, you'll be tangled together, blankets twisted, and hair sticking up in every direction. Of course, sharing a bed means sharing everything else. Lice and fleas are part of the deal, their nightly feasts an accepted nuisance. You scratch at your scalp, wondering if it's the straw, the wool, or just one of your tiny bedmates. Here's a quirky detail: some households kept a special knit comb on the bedside table, passing it around before bed like a family heirloom. Historians still argue whether this actually helped or just spread the problem around. Either way, you're resigned to waking up itchy. Privacy is non-existent. You hear every sigh, every mumbled dream, every midnight shuffle. If someone gets up for a drink or a trip to the chamber pot, everyone wakes up. It's frustrating, sure, but also comforting in its way. You know, without a doubt, that you're not alone in this world, no matter how cold it gets outside. Sometimes, if the night is especially harsh, you'll even let a neighbor or two squeeze in. Maybe their own fire went out or their roof sprang a leak. The communal bed grows, creaking under the weight, but no one's turned away. It's part survival, part unspoken village rule in winter. Warmth is for sharing. You remember stories from years past. Nights when the entire village huddled together in the church or the largest barn during storms so fierce the wind ripped roofs and felled trees. Those nights, everyone slept in a tangled mess. Children curled against strangers, old men snoring beside chickens, the air thick with the scent of sweat, hay, and hope. Historians still debate whether these mass sleepovers actually saved lives or just created new problems, like spreading illness. You suspect it was a bit of both. Tonight, as the fire dies down to glowing embers, you feel a familiar heaviness settle over the bed. It's the weight of shared lives, pressed close by necessity and habit. You hear your little sister's soft breathing, your father's steady snore, the dog's quiet whimper as it chases rabbits in its sleep, and, of course, the gentle crunch of straw. The background music to every peasant's night. You can't help but smile at the absurdity of it all. The bed is crowded, the air stuffy, and you're pretty sure you just got elbowed in the ribs. But you're warm, and for a few hours, you forget about the cold outside. You drift off, comforted by the nearness of family, knowing that, itchy, crowded, and noisy as it is, this is what survival looks like on the coldest nights. As you drift towards sleep, you sense the steady warmth radiating from more than just your fellow humans. In the medieval peasant's world, walls are thin, the wind is relentless, and sometimes the only thing standing between you and freezing to death is a surprisingly loyal cow. It's not unusual, almost expected, for livestock to share your living space, especially on the harshest winter nights. You shuffle your feet, nudging a bundle of hay aside, and glance at the shadowy corner where the family's one precious cow chews her cud. She's separated from the rest of the house by a wooden partition, if you're fancy, or maybe just a rope. Tonight, you're grateful for her presence. Her massive, slow breath sends little clouds into the chilly air, and you swear the room is a degree or two warmer for it. Historians still argue whether the heat from a cow could actually make a real difference in a poorly insulated cottage, but you know that on the coldest nights, every bit counts. It turns out cows, sheep, goats, and even chickens are more than just food on legs. They're living radiators. The bigger the beast, the better the heat. Some peasants even build their houses with the animals in mind, putting stalls under the same roof as the family, separated only by a low wall or a curtain. You might wrinkle your nose at the smell, but you'd never complain about the warmth. In fact, in the dead of winter, you might even be jealous of the cows with their thick hides and unbothered attitudes. You recall a neighbor's story, how his prized so once crawled under his bed during a blizzard and refused to leave until spring. It sounds like a tall tale, but you've seen pigs do stranger things. Here's a quirky tidbit. In some alpine villages, families would actually sleep above the barn, letting the heat from the animals rise up through the floorboards. It's a clever design, and you wonder why your own cottage doesn't have that feature. Maybe next year, if you survive this one. Tonight, it's not just the cow in the corner. You've also got a couple of chickens roosting on a beam overhead. Their soft clucking is oddly soothing, a gentle lullaby that mixes with the crackle of the fire. You watch them fluff their feathers, tucking their beaks under their wings. If you're lucky, they'll lay an egg or two by morning, an unexpected bonus. Of course, sharing space with animals isn't all soft warmth and rustic charm. There are downsides, like the ever-present risk of stepping in something squishy on your midnight walk to the slop bucket. You wince, remembering last week's incident, when your sister shrieked after discovering a goat had eaten her only pair of mittens. Historians still debate whether the benefits of indoor livestock outweighed the hygiene issues. You're pretty sure your mother would have an answer, especially when she's scrubbing the floor. You can't help but laugh at the realities of this arrangement. You're pressed between your snoring brother and a wall, feet tangled in straw, and the air smells distinctly of barnyard. But there's something undeniably comforting about the presence of these animals. They're part of the family in their own way. Sometimes you even talk to the cow before bed, confiding secrets you wouldn't share with your siblings. The cow, for her part, listens in dignified silence, chewing thoughtfully. The dog stretches at your feet, grumbling in its sleep. It's a small animal, but in winter every degree of warmth counts, so much that you sometimes wish you were small enough to curl up with the chickens in their nest. You're not above admitting it. Before you finally close your eyes, you pull the blanket tighter around your shoulders and listen to the soft, steady breathing of animals and humans alike. It's a strange chorus, but it's the sound of survival. You might be living in the shadow of your livestock, but tonight, you're grateful for every beast and bird who's helping you make it to spring. After all, on the coldest nights, warmth is a team effort. And if that team includes a flatulent cow and 3 argumentative chickens, well, that's just how peasants roll. The smell of smoked dung and faintly scorched bread fills your nostrils as you shuffle closer to the fire. In a medieval peasant's home, the hearth is the heart. Its warmth is the only thing standing between you and a night of shivering teeth and frozen toes. But keeping that fire going through the long, icy hours is an art form. If you let it go out, you're in for a morning even worse than usual, with frost on your breath and a house so cold you can see your own shadow shiver. You watch as your mother gently tends the fire, feeding it a careful mix of fuel. Wood is precious, especially in winter when the forests belong to the Lord, and gathering fallen branches is a risky business. The best logs are reserved for emergencies, special occasions, or when someone in the family is sick and needs extra warmth. For most nights, you rely on whatever you can scrape together. Tonight, that means burning dried dung cakes, yes, actual cow or horse droppings, collected and shaped into flat patties during the warmer months, then left to dry in the sun. You wrinkle your nose at the thought, but there's no denying the practicality. Dung burns slow and steady, giving off a surprising amount of heat. It smells, of course, but by now your nose hardly notices. Quickie fact, some peasants swore by goat dung, claiming it had the best burn-to-smell ratio, while others argued for cow or horse. Historians still argue which animal's droppings made the premium fuel, but you'll take whatever you can get. You recall the old joke your uncle tells. If it burns, it's fuel. If it doesn't, it's half true. Some nights, you throw dried heather, rushes, or even old shoes into the flames. There are stories of desperate winters when families burned thatched roof patches or broken furniture just to survive until spring. You hope it never comes to that, but you keep a wary eye on the rickety bench all the same. As the fire crackles, you notice how it's built more for efficiency than comfort. The flames are banked with ashes, a trick that keeps them smoldering through the night with just a hint of warmth. If you wake up before dawn, you can usually coax the embers back to life with a few careful breaths and a new piece of fuel. Sometimes, you bury a half-burnt log in the coals, hoping it'll last till morning. It's a nightly gamble, and sometimes you lose. You help your father stack a few dung cakes near the hearth, careful not to let them fall into the rushes on the floor. Fires are a double-edged sword, vital but dangerous. There's always the fear of sparks catching in the straw or dry wood, turning your home into an inferno. You've heard of families losing everything in a single night, their possessions and memories gone in a flash. Historians still debate whether peasants feared fire more than famine. You suspect the answer depends on who you ask and how cold it is outside. The smoke is another problem. With no chimney or only a crude one, it has nowhere to go but up into the rafters and out a small hole in the roof, if you're lucky. More often, it pools in the room, stinging your eyes and making you cough. You've learned to keep low, where the air is clearer, and to accept the ever-present haze as the price of survival. Your clothes, hair, and even your skin carry the scent of smoke long after the fire dies. Tonight, you're grateful for the heat, no matter how it's made. You shuffle back to your bed, feeling the warmth on your face, the chill on your back. The fire is both a comfort and a reminder of how precarious your life is. One missed night, and the cold could win. But for now, the embers glow, the shadows dance, and you're just warm enough to dream of spring. And if you ever find yourself complaining about your modern heating bill, remember, at least you're not arguing over which pile of dung burns best. You cough softly, eyes watering as smoke curls through the low room. Here's the great paradox of the medieval peasant's fire. It saves you from the cold, but it never lets you forget its price. In most cottages, there's no proper chimney. Just a hole in the roof, if you're lucky, or maybe a loose board propped open to let the worst of the fumes drift out. The fire sits in a shallow pit at the center of the room, the smoke rising, swirling, and sometimes hanging in the air like a fog that never lifts. You've grown used to the sting. Every night, you and your family keep close to the ground, where the air is a little clearer. Sometimes, when the wind is right, the smoke billows out of the roof opening. Other nights, it just settles into the rafters, blackening the beams and leaving a sooty residue on everything you own. Your mother wipes the shelves each week, but the soot always returns, painting your world in shades of grey. The smoke isn't just an inconvenience, it's a real danger. You've heard stories of children choking in their sleep, of elders whose coughs never went away. Historians still debate how much medieval lung disease can be blamed on these smoky rooms, but you don't need a scholar to tell you it's not healthy. Sometimes you wake up with your throat raw and your eyes crusted shut. In the summer, you dream of a breeze. In the winter, you just hope for a night when the wind takes the smoke away. Still, you do what you can. Some families hang wet cloths near the pit to trap the worst of the soot. Others rig up makeshift hoods from planks or sacks, trying to funnel the smoke toward the roof hole. It helps little. But most nights, you just accept it as part of the world: cold, hunger, and smoke. If you're lucky, you sit with your back to the fire, letting the warmth seep in, and try to ignore the rest. There's an odd comfort in it too. The smoke brings with it a sense of home, of safety, of huddling together against the darkness. You associate it with stories told by firelight, with meals shared, with the simple fact of surviving another winter night. You imagine that centuries from now, people will marvel at how you lived, how you breathed smoke and called it warmth. You glance up at the ceiling, where the rafters are black and glistening with creosote, and you wonder how many winters they've seen. You wonder how many more they'll survive before the roof caves in, or the fire finally wins. You hope it's not this year. As the room grows quiet, the fire dies down to red embers, and the smoke thins just enough to let you breathe easy. You pull your blanket closer, nestle into the straw, and listen to the soft sounds of your family settling in for the night. Someone coughs, someone mutters, someone else sighs in their sleep. The smoke drifts on, a silent reminder of the balance you strike every night, between warmth and danger, comfort and risk. And as you close your eyes, you think tomorrow, maybe, the wind will be kinder. But tonight, you're grateful for whatever warmth the fire gives, smoke and all. With the fire guttering low, warmth in the room is fleeting. So you turn to another ancient survival tactic, eating something hot before bed. Tonight, your mother ladles out a thick, steaming pottage from the cauldron hanging above the embers. It's a humble meal, mostly barley and beans, with a few wilted leeks floating in the broth and maybe, just maybe, a shred of bacon if it's been a lucky week. You grip the rough wooden bowl in your hands, relishing the heat that seeps into your frozen fingers before you even take a bite. You blow on the surface, watching the steam swirl and curl in the smoky air. The first mouthful is always the best earthy filling, and just enough to banish the ache in your belly for another night. Medieval peasants rarely went to bed hungry if they could help it. A hot meal before sleep wasn't just comfort food, it was fuel, helping your body fight the cold through the long, dark hours. You eat slowly, letting each spoonful linger, wishing the bowl were bottomless. There's an old saying in the village, soup warms twice, once in the pot and again in the belly. You're not sure who first said it, but you repeat it every winter. Tonight, you notice your little sister scraping the bottom of her bowl with a determined look. You quietly pass her the last spoonful from yours. She grins, cheeks flushed with gratitude and the glow of the fire. Beside you, your father pours a cup of ale and sets it by the hearth. He stirs in a hot poker, making the drink hiss and pop. Hot ale isn't exactly a delicacy, but it takes the edge off the chill. Sometimes, you add a pinch of spice, pepper if you have it, or even a dried berry for a hint of flavor. Historians argue about just how common these luxuries were, but you know a little goes a long way. On special nights, midwinter feasts, saints' days, or when someone returns from a distant village, you might taste something truly decadent. Roast turnip, a chunk of hard cheese, or a crust of bread soaked in the broth. But most nights, it's the same sturdy pottage, filling your belly and warming your bones. You remember stories of harder times, when the winter larder ran bare and families stretched their meals with whatever they could find: wild greens, acorns, even tree bark. You hope it doesn't come to that this year, but you're always prepared to eat what the land gives, no matter how meager. As you finish your meal, you settle in, feeling the warmth radiate outward from your core. Sleep feels possible now, the cold on your skin less biting with food in your stomach. Your mother collects the empty bowls, wiping them with a scrap of cloth and setting them near the door for morning. In the corner, your father raises his mug and murmurs a blessing for another day survived. Around you, the family relaxes, bellies full, spirited just enough to face the night ahead. The room feels a little smaller, a little warmer, a little more like home. You close your eyes, the taste of the soup lingering, and let yourself drift towards sleep, grateful for a hot meal and for the hope that tomorrow brings another. With the last bits of pottage warming your belly, the fire barely aglow, and the room settling into silence, you prepare for the final nightly ritual, snuffing out the light. In a peasant's cottage, that means tallow candles, if you're lucky enough to have one. You reach for a stubby candle sitting in a shallow dish. It's made of beef or mutton fat, poured around a bit of twisted linen for a wick. The flame flickers, casting long, dancing shadows up the soot-stained walls. The smell is distinctive. Tallow gives off a greasy, animal scent, mixing with the ever-present smoke, and you know you'll be wearing that perfume in your hair and clothes for days. Still, the candle is a small luxury, its soft light a comfort against the darkness pressing in at the door. Candles are precious. You use them sparingly, saving them for chores that can't wait until morning, or to light the way to the slop bucket outside. Most nights, you try to make do at the firelight, but on these long, winter evenings, the candle lets you stretch out a few more minutes to mend a torn shirt, check your feet for blisters, or, if you're lucky, read a scrap of a prayer or story. If anyone in the house can read at all, you remember the cautionary tales children told to keep clear of the flame, to never fall asleep with a candle burning. A single spill, a moment of carelessness, and the rushes on the floor could catch in an instant. The threat of fire is always there, lurking just behind the gentle glow. Tonight, you sit quietly, watching the flame dance and gutter each time the wind finds its way through the wall. Your brother tells a quiet joke, your mother hums a tune, and you all linger a little, enjoying the simple pleasure of not being in total darkness. Soon enough, though, the candle is pinched out. Darkness swallows the room, thick, absolute, the kind of darkness modern folk rarely know. Outside the cottage, there are no streetlights, no passing cars, just the moon and stars, if the clouds allow, and the faint glow of distant fires from neighboring homes. You blink into the blackness, letting your eyes adjust. Night in the medieval world is not just a backdrop. It is a living thing, full of uncertainty. You feel your way to your sleeping spot, careful not to disturb the dog or step on a stray chicken. The room is full of the soft sounds of breathing, the shifting of blankets, the occasional cough. In the darkness, every sound is sharper, every movement amplified. Yet, there's comfort in the dark too. You feel cocooned, tucked away from the wind and the unknown beyond your door. The world shrinks to the size of your bed, your family, your home. You whisper a good night into the gloom, listening for the familiar responses. Someone farts, someone giggles. You all settle in. As you close your eyes, you realize the darkness isn't as frightening as you thought. It's just another layer of the night, another part of the ancient dance of survival. The candle may be out, but the warmth of your family, your animals, and your home lingers on. You drift into sleep, trusting that the sun will rise again, and with it, the promise of another day. You lie in the darkness, the warmth of the pottage slowly fading, and listen to the sounds of the house, the dog's soft snore, the quiet shifting of your siblings, the faint creak of the rafters as the wind presses against the roof. But there's another constant companion in these winter nights: illness. You feel it in the ache of your bones, the scratch at the back of your throat, a cough that won't quite go away. It's no secret winter brings sickness. The cold bites deep, and the damp settles in your chest. Your neighbors talk about the winter ague, the fevers, and the coughing fits that seem to sweep through the village as soon as the nights grow long. There's no doctor in the modern sense, just the wise woman who knows her herbs, and the prayers whispered to saints whose names you can't quite remember. Sometimes your mother brews a fall, tasting tea from dried yarrow or elderflower, hoping it'll loosen a cough or drive out a chill. She crushes garlic and onion, mixing them with honey if you're lucky or with vinegar if you're not. Historians still debate how effective these medieval remedies were, but you're convinced that half the power is in the ritual itself. The careful brewing, the murmured words, the hope. You think of old Marjorie next door, who swears by a poultice of warm bread and mustard seeds for chest pains, or the village priest, who sprinkles holy water and tells you to sleep with a relic under your pillow. Sometimes you do both, hedging your bets. If you're very sick, your family might carry you to church, light a candle, and pray for Saint Blaise or Saint Roch to intercede. There's a kind of dark humor in this nightly battle. You and your siblings trade stories of the worst remedies you've faced. The burning taste of horseradish, the stinging slap of a nettle bath, the time your aunt tried to sweat out the sickness by bundling you in every blanket in the house until you felt like a roast chicken. You groan at the memory, but you'd do it again if it meant waking with clear lungs and a steady pulse. You know the dangers. A simple chill can turn into something far worse. Your father still tells the story of the winter when half the village lost their voices, and a few never got them back. The elders talk of bad airs and evil humors, and while you're not sure what that means, you know enough to keep away from the neighbor's house when the black cloth hangs in the window. Yet, for all the fear and discomfort, there's a sense of resilience too. You see it in your mother's determination, in your siblings' stubborn laughter, in the way the village pulls together when someone falls ill. If there's a miracle cure, it's community, warmth, food, and the steady knowledge that you're not facing the long night alone. As you drift towards sleep, you feel the warmth of your family press close, the herbal scent lingering in the air, and the hope that you'll wake in the morning feeling just a little better. You whisper a prayer, half to the saints, half to the darkness itself, that this winter's illnesses will pass you by, or at least leave you strong enough to greet the dawn. Sleep comes in fits and starts. The cold creeps in wherever it can, and sometimes you wake to a new ache or a numbness in your fingers and toes. Tonight, your left hand feels strangely stiff, and you remember the whispered stories about frostbite. Though no one in your family calls that, they talk about winter rot, or the blackening. And you've seen for yourself what happens when the cold bites too hard and too long. You flex your fingers, willing warmth back into them. Your mother once told you about a neighbor who lost the tips of 2 toes after a night spent a snowdrift. The local healer tried everything: warm compressors, poultices of goose fat and honey, even holding the poor man's feet near the fire in hopes the heat would draw out the cold. Historians debate whether any of these remedies actually worked, but in your world, you try anything that might tilt the scales. If you're unlucky enough to wake with skin gone pale, waxy, or, worst of all, black, your family springs into action. You remember your grandmother's advice: rub it with snow, then warm it slow. The logic is to avoid shocking the flesh with sudden heat, though you've heard of desperate souls plunging frozen hands right into the fire's glow. That almost always ends badly. There are other cures as well, some more desperate than others. A poultice of mashed onions, a wrap of boiled nettle leaves, a whisper of prayer to whichever saint is said to watch over travelers and the lost. Sometimes the village healer will bleed the afflicted limb, hoping to let out the bad humors, or cover it in rancid butter to keep out the frost. You grimace, remembering the smell of that treatment. Yet for all the folklore and failed remedies, you know the simple truth: the best cure is prevention. You double up your socks of straw, tip your hands deep beneath your arms, and do your best not to fall asleep with any skin exposed. Your mother checks you and your siblings before bed, making sure everyone is as bundled as possible. She counts fingers and toes in the morning, just in case. You hear the stories that float through the village, of traveler found frozen in the fields, of children who wandered outside at night and never came back. The cold is a living thing, relentless and unforgiving. You respect it and you fear it, but you also know that sometimes survival is just about getting through one more night. You keep your limbs tucked close, share your warmth with whoever is nearest, and hope that the fire will last until dawn. If you're lucky, you'll wake to a room filled with grey light, fingers tingling as the blood returns, and the knowledge that you've made it through one more winter night. As you drift back to sleep, you promise yourself to check on your siblings at first light, to rub their hands and feet and laugh away the fear. You hope that, with a little luck and all the tricks you know, you'll never have to test the village healer's stranger cures. You lie in the darkness, your body wrapped in rough layers, the air thick with the smell of smoke and livestock. But even as you start to drift, you can't ignore the weight of the night pressing against the thin walls. A weight not just of cold, but of something deeper, older, and harder to shake. In the medieval world, winter nights are more than just a physical threat. They're haunted by fears, stories, and superstitions as real as the frost on your breath. It starts with a creak in the rafters, or a thump from the corner where the shadows pool. Your heart skips. Maybe it's just the wind, maybe it's the family dog rolling over, or maybe it's something else. You weren't supposed to listen to old Nan's stories before bed, but how could you resist? She has a knack for whispering just loud enough for everyone to hear about the ghosts that prowl the lanes, the witches who ride the wind, and the spirits that slip in through cracks no amount of mud or straw can block. You find yourself glancing at the hearth, where the fire's glow feeds to embers. In the dying light, every shadow seems to move. You remember the tale of the nightmare, a creature that sits on your chest if you sleep on your back, stealing your breath and filling your dreams with terror. Historians still argue whether such stories were born from sleep paralysis or from desperate attempts to explain the unexplainable. All you know is you'd rather sleep on your side, just in case. Someone in your bed mumbles a prayer under their breath, a habit so ancient that even the most skeptical among you join in. You clutch the little sachet of herbs tied to your shirt, a charm against evil that your mother swears by. It's filled with sage, rosemary, and a pinch of salt, just enough to ward off wandering spirits. Quirky tidbitty in some regions, people would hang iron keys or scissors above the door, believing the sharp metal would keep witches and ghosts at bay. Your house has a rusty knife wedged into the lintel, a silent guardian you barely notice during the day but eye warily at night. The wind howls, and you think about the wolves in the forest, their howls mixing with the wind's cry. Are they just after the livestock, or is there something supernatural in their voices? There are stories, always stories, about wolves that walk like men, about eyes glowing red at the edge of the field. You tell yourself it's nonsense, but you still tuck your feet in tight, as though the blanket could shield you from things that belong to the dark. Your father once told you about the will of the wisps, strange lights that appear in the night leading travelers into bogs or worse. He said he followed one as a boy, only to find himself lost until dawn. Historians still debate whether these were tricks of the light, marsh gas, or something more sinister. You promise yourself you'll never follow a wandering light, no matter how lost or desperate you become. Tonight, the cold isn't the only thing keeping you awake. It's the stories, the half-remembered warnings, the way the darkness seems to press in a little closer after midnight. You hear your little sister whimper in her sleep, and you reach out to comfort her, repeating the old rhyme about the good spirits who watch over the house. The words feel clumsy in your mouth, but they help, if only a little. You glance at the window, a crude shutter barely holding back the wind. Sometimes, you imagine faces in the frost patterns, old gods or lost souls searching for warmth. You know it's just your imagination, but you pull the covers up anyway, just in case. You drift between wakefulness and dreams, caught between the warmth of the bed and the chill of the unknown. The night is long, the cold relentless, but it's the fears, spoken and unspoken, that truly test your courage. Tomorrow, in the bright light of day, you'll laugh about ghosts and monsters. But tonight, every creak, every moan of the wind, is a reminder that in the medieval world, the coldest nights are haunted by more than just the weather. You shift under the covers, scratching at your side where the rough wool chafes your skin, and try not to think about what's crawling in the straw. The night is at its coldest, but at least you're wrapped up tight. Well, as tight as a peasant ever is. You might wonder what medieval folks wore to bed when the wind howled and frost crept along the walls. The answer, like most things here, is simply whatever you wore during the day, plus anything else you could pile on. Forget about silk pajamas or even those cartoon print flannels you probably have stashed in your dresser. The concept of night clothes as a separate wardrobe item is a luxury reserved for lords and clergy. For you, bedwear is about survival, not style. You sleep in your shifts, tunics, or whatever layers you manage to accumulate throughout the day. If you're lucky, you might have a slightly cleaner lined shirt reserved for sleeping, but that's more fantasy than fact for most. Historians still argue if peasants ever bothered changing for bed at all, or if they simply collapsed in whatever they had on, too tired to care. You glance around and see the rest of your family bundled up much the same way. Your sister still has her apron, and your brother's wearing his patched hose, one sock missing. Again, the youngest sleeps in nothing but a long shirt, feet poking out from under the blanket. You remember the joke old Hob told at the alehouse. If you're warm enough to take something off at night, you're rich enough to pay the taxman's supper. There's a grain of truth in that. The idea of stripping down is pure fantasy for a peasant in December. But necessity is the mother of invention, and peasants have their tricks. Some tie bits of cloth around their wrists and ankles to clock out drafts. Others sleep with their cloaks still on, hoods pulled low over their faces. You once tried wrapping your head in a scarf to keep your ears from freezing, but woke up tangled and half-smothered, much to your siblings' amusement. Still, desperate times call for desperate measures. Here's a quirky tidbit in some regions. Folks believed that sleeping naked, or even barefoot, could invite bad luck or sickness, especially in winter. The logic went that exposing your body to cold air would let evil spirits or night chills sneak in. So, even if you wanted to air out those feet, superstition and the threat of waking up with a cough kept you bundled up tight. Of course, all these layers make for a bit of a struggle if you need to get up in the night. You've mastered the art of wriggling out of the communal bed without disturbing too many limbs, then tiptoeing across the freezing floor, all while wrapped up like a cabbage. The real challenge is getting back in without losing that precious pocket of heat you worked so hard to build up. You sometimes dream of having a soft-lined nightshirt, like the one you saw hanging from the manor's washing line. The lord's family even has bedgowns, special garments just for sleeping. You joke to your siblings that if you ever came across such luxury, you'd never leave bed. Historians still debate if bedgowns ever trickled down to the peasantry, or if they remained a distant dream, as unreachable as a feather mattress or a breakfast without gruel. Tonight, as you nestle deeper into your makeshift bedding, you find a certain comfort in the familiar scratch of wool and the faint, musty smell of your cloak. You tug it higher, tucking your chin down, and sigh. It's not glamorous, but it's yours. You drift off, cocooned in layers, grateful for every thread, every patch, every scrap that scrands between you and the cold. You wake to the sound of your youngest sibling whimpering, their little body curled into a ball at the edge of the bed. In a medieval peasant's home, keeping the children warm isn't just a matter of comfort, it's a matter of survival. The cold is cruelest to the smallest and weakest, and every parent knows the dread of waking to find a child shivering uncontrollably, or worse, silent and still. You reach over, pulling your sibling closer into the knot of bodies huddled under the battered blanket. That's the first rule of winter: never let anyone sleep alone. Children, in particular, are tucked right in the middle, sandwiched between adults like precious coals in a bed of ash. Your mother learned this trick from her mother, and her mother before her. Historians still argue whether this was a universal practice or varied from village to village, but in your house, it's as natural as breathing. Your mother fusses, checking to make sure no little toes are poking out from under the covers. If she finds any, she tucks them back in, muttering about frost, goblins, that nibble on children's feet. It's half superstition, half gentle warning, and just quirky enough that your siblings take it seriously. You remember being a child yourself? Terrified that the frost goblin would sneak in and leave you with blue toes. You still sleep with your feet pulled in, just in case. Some nights, if the wind is especially sharp, your parents will pile extra layers, old cloaks, patched tunics, even the dog, over the children. You've seen your father drape his own coat over the littlest ones, shivering in his shirt so they can have that extra bit of warmth. There's no greater act of love than sacrificing your own warmth for another, especially when the cold is biting and the fire is low. The baby, swaddled tight in a bundle of rags and old linen, is cradled in your mother's arms. She sleeps sitting upright, so the baby can share her body heat all night long. You've heard stories of mothers using heated stones wrapped in cloth to warm the bed before settling the baby in, though in your house, stones are more likely to be used for cooking than comfort. Still, on the coldest nights, you sometimes sneak a brick near the fire, hoping to create your own little pocket of warmth. Quirky fact, in some places, families made bed tents. By draping cloaks or sheets over a rope strung across the bed, trapping heat around the children. It makes for a cozy, secret world where the wind can't find you. You tried this with your siblings, but the dog knocked it down before midnight, leaving you all laughing in the dark. Historians still debate whether such tricks actually helped, or if they were just another game to distract from the cold. Illness is a constant threat. A sniffle can turn into something worse overnight, and you've learned to listen for the sound of coughing in the dark. Your mother keeps a bundle of dried herbs by the bed, sage for strength, thyme for coughs, a little rosemary for luck. If anyone wakes with a chill, she brews a foul, tasting tea and tucks them in even tighter. You pretend to hate it, but you're secretly grateful for her care. Older children take turns cuddling the younger ones, acting as little human furnaces. Some nights, you find yourself with 2 or 3 siblings clinging to you like limpets, their cold noses pressed against your back. It's awkward, but you wouldn't trade it for anything. The warmth of family is the only sure defense against the winter's bite. You whisper stories to the little ones, tales of brave knights and clever foxes, hoping to distract them from the cold. You tell them that spring is coming, that the snow will melt, and that soon they'll be running barefoot in the grass again. The promise of warmth is almost as powerful as the warmth itself. As you finally drift back to sleep, the baby sighs contentedly, your siblings snuggle closer, and you realize that in this huddle of bodies and blankets, you've created a fortress against the night. It's not perfect, but it's enough. And in the medieval world, that's the best you can hope for. Morning is hours away, but the darkness feels lighter when you're pressed shoulder to shoulder with your family, all breathing the same cold, smoky air. Living through a medieval winter is not a solo sport. It's a team effort, and every hardship seems to pull you closer, for better or for worse. The cold squeezes out the petty squabbles of daylight, replacing them with cooperation, whispered jokes, and the quiet, comforting rhythm of life shared. You shift in the bed, careful not to jostle your little brother, and catch a glimpse of your parents across the straw. Your father is awake, eyes glinting in the half-light, his hand resting protectively over your mother's. They speak in soft voices, planning tomorrow's chores, checking in on each child, and sometimes just sharing a laugh about the dog's latest escapade. It's strange how the worst nights often bring out the best stories. Your mother tells the tale of the year the river froze so solid, the neighbor's cow skated halfway to the next village before anyone caught up. You all laugh, picturing the scene, the absurdity of a cow on ice making the darkness feel a little less heavy. Historians still argue whether hardship truly fostered stronger family bonds, or if that's just the nostalgia of later generations looking back. But lying here, you can feel it, the shared struggle glues you together. There's no privacy, no secrets, no hiding bad moods or grumbles beneath the weight of wool and straw. Everything is out in the open, whether you like it or not. Annoyances, love, and the unspoken understanding that you'll get this as long as you stick close. You think about how arguments fade in the face of cold. The fight over the last crust of bread, the bickering over chores, even the old grudge about who ruined the best blanket. None of it matters when survival's on the line. You find yourself tolerating your brother's fidgeting, forgiving your sister for stealing your spot near the fire, even letting the dog have extra room at your feet. The cold demands compromise, and somehow, the act of sharing makes the night less bitter. Quirky family traditions fill the hours. Before sleep, you play a game of who can tell the tallest tale, each story more outrageous than the last. Your father swears he once saw a mouse wearing a hat. Your mother claims she traded a potato for a magic stone, and your brother insists he can hear the snow talking if he listens hard enough. You all know these stories are nonsense, but they warm the spirit, if not the toes. Sometimes, the closeness drives you mad. You long for space, a moment of silence, or just a bed of your own. But even in those moments, you recognize the safety in numbers. The coldest nights are when you need each other most. You remember your grandmother's saying, "Toe fires burn twice as bright, but a family burns all night long." It's a little awkward, especially when you're all squeezed in so tight that turning over is a group activity, but you wouldn't trade it for anything. Historians debate whether medieval families were really as close as the stories suggest, or if the daily grind bred more frustration than affection. You suspect it's both. Living cheek by jowl makes for short tempers, but it also forges a kind of loyalty you can't find elsewhere. The morning will bring new arguments, new chores, and maybe even a slammed door or two, but right now, in the hush of a winter night, you're united in the most important battle of all, keeping warm, keeping safe, and holding tight to each other. You close your eyes, listening to your family's breathing, a harmony of snores, sighs, and the occasional sleepy murmur. The cold is still there, prowling at the edges, but it can't quite get in. Not tonight. Not when you're all together, hearts and huddled close, holding out until the dawn. Your eyes flutter open for a moment, and you hear footsteps outside, soft, careful, but definitely there. You tense, not from fear of ghosts this time, but from something much more tangible, the very real threats that lurk in the night. While your family huddles together for warmth, the entire village understands that survival depends on watching out for one another, especially when the coldest nights make people, and animals, desperate. The village isn't just a collection of houses scattered across muddy fields. It's a living network of people bound together by necessity. You remember the routine every evening. Someone is chosen for the night watch. It's usually one of the older boys, sometimes an exhausted father, bundled up in every scrap of clothing he owns, lantern in hand, tramping up and down the single path that weaves between cottages. Tonight, it's your uncle's turn. You heard him grumbling about it earlier, muttering that even the wolves have more sense than to be out in this weather. You can picture him now, shivering in the dark, trying to keep his torch lit, scanning the hedges for movement. It's a thankless job, but an essential one. Historians still argue whether night watches were truly effective in stopping thieves or wild animals. But you know that stories of break-ins and missing chickens are not just old wives' tales. The threat isn't just from outsiders. Hunger gnaws at every belly, and sometimes desperation drives even a neighbor to sneak into another's storehouse. You recall last winter, when the Smith turnips mysteriously vanished. No one accused anyone outright, but the side eyes and whispered rumors lingered for weeks. Yet, when the blizzard hit and roofs began to sag under the snow's weight, every able body pitched in. That's the paradox of peasant life: suspicion and solidarity side by side. Sometimes watch is more about community than danger. Your uncle often stops to chat with the neighbor on the next shift, sharing news or trading a joke to keep the cold at bay. There's a quirky tradition in your village: whoever finishes a watch leaves a sprig of holly at the next person's door, a silent sign that all is well. You think it's silly, but you also know how much comfort that little green leaf brings when you find it in the darkness. Inside, the solidarity continues. If a family runs out of firewood or food, there's an unspoken rule: you share what you have, because next week it might be your turn to go without. You remember the time your roof leaked so badly that the entire family had to sleep in the neighbor's barn for 2 nights. In the daylight, you squabble over boundaries and grazing rights, but at night, when frost creeps up the walls, all those arguments seem smaller. The children of the village are experts at carrying messages between houses. If someone's fire goes out or a baby gets sick, a child will be sent running, barefoot and quick, from one door to the next, summoning help. You've done it yourself, racing through the freezing air, heart pounding, knowing that every minute counts. Historians debate whether these acts of mutual aid were born of kindness or simple necessity. You suspect it's both. No one wants to see a neighbor freeze, But everyone knows that tomorrow's trouble could easily be their own. You drift back to sleep to the distant sound of your uncle's boots crunching outside and the soft murmur of voices in the next house. The village is a patchwork of lives, stitched together by hardship and hope. Out here, on winter's edge, the only warmth that truly lasts is the warmth you share. It's not just the cold that makes sleep elusive, it's the knowledge that if you lie too still for too long, the chill will creep in and settle deep in your bones. So, you do what peasants have always done, you keep busy, even at night. There's a rhythm to winter work, a routine that's as much about staying warm as it is about survival. Idleness is the enemy. If you aren't moving, you're freezing. You glance around the dim room. Someone is always up, poking at the fire, checking on the animals, or tending to a restless child. Your mother sits by the hearth spinning wool by the flickering light. Her hands move quickly, expertly, twisting fleece into thread. She says it's the only way to keep her fingers from going numb, and you believe her. Historians still argue whether winter was truly a time of rest for peasants or an endless cycle of small, necessary chores. In your experience, rest is just another word for slightly less frantic. You pull yourself from the warmth of the bed, careful not to wake your siblings, and shuffle over to help your father mend a broken bucket. The wood is cold and stiff, the iron bands biting at your fingers, but the work gives you purpose and, more importantly, keeps your blood moving. Sometimes you help card wool, shell beans, or patch up worn shoes. Whatever needs doing, really. Every task is a small victory against the cold. Quirky fact, in some villages, people believe that certain chores should only be done at night during winter, especially spinning and weaving. They claimed the spirits of the house were less likely to tangle the thread if you worked after dark. You're not sure if you believe it, but it makes spinning by candlelight feel a little more magical. On nights when the wind is less fierce, you take turns checking on the animals in the byre. The cows and goats need their bedding fluffed, fresh straw spread, and water buckets broken free of ice. You move quickly, your breath hanging in the air, every step an effort to keep the cold at bay. You marvel at how the animals seem to take winter in stride, huddling together just like your family, sharing warmth in their own stubborn way. Sometimes there are group tasks, like cleaning the rushes or beating dust from the bedding. The whole family joins in, singing old songs or telling jokes to make the work go faster. Your brother starts a game of who can shiver the loudest, and soon you're all laughing, the sound echoing off the mud walls and making the night seem less grim. Historians debate whether these communal chores built stronger families or simply wore everyone down. In your house, it feels like both. You groan at the endless work, but you'd miss it if it ever stopped. There's a certain satisfaction in knowing you're contributing, that your small efforts are helping everyone make it through another night. When the chores are done, you treat yourself to a few precious minutes by the fire. The warmth is fleeting, but it's enough to take the edge off. You watch the flames dance, listen to the pop and hiss of burning fuel, and feel a quiet pride in your work. No one may notice the mended bucket or the extra straw in the barn, but you know those little things matter. Sleep comes easier after busy hands, your body tired but pleasantly warm. You snuggle back into bed, feeling the lingering heat from movement, and smile. In the world of the medieval peasant, staying busy isn't just about getting things done, it's about staying alive. Winter nights are long, but dawn always comes, pale and uncertain, leaking through the cracks in the shutters. You wake to the familiar sounds, your father stirring the embers into life, the soft clatter of your mother setting out the morning's rye bread, the muffled complaints of your younger siblings as they untangle themselves from the heap of blankets and arms. The air is still cold, but there's comfort in the routine, a reminder that for all the hardships, you're still here. Breakfast is a meager affair, a crust of bread dunked in thin ale or watered down milk. Sometimes, if you're lucky, there's a bit of cheese or a spoonful of porridge left from the night before. You eat quickly, savoring every bite, knowing there's work to be done before the sun has properly risen. In winter, food is both fuel and hope. Every meal is a small reassurance that the stores will last, at least for another day. Once the animals are tended and the fire is stoked, you head outside to collect more firewood. The frost crunches under your feet, and your breath hangs in the air like a ghost. Gathering wood is a daily ritual, one that can't be neglected. Not unless you want to face the wrath of a cold, dark evening. The best wood is already gone. Picked clean in autumn, so you settle for whatever you can find: fallen branches, scraps from the hedgerow, anything that will burn. Sometimes, desperate for warmth, You even consider burning dried dung, just as your neighbors do. It's not pleasant, but it keeps the cold at bay. Winter chores are relentless. There's always something to mend, something to clean, something to prepare for the next day. You help your mother render fat for candles, grateful for the extra light. You repair fishing nets and traps, hoping the river will thaw enough for you to catch something soon. If luck is on your side, you might even find a rabbit snared in the woods, a rare treat for the whole family. There are days when the monotony weighs on you, when the darkness and cold feel never-ending. On those days, you find solace in stories. After supper, your family gathers around the hearth, sharing tales of saints and monsters, of lost kings and clever foxes. Your grandmother is the best storyteller. Her voice weaves magic from nothing, turning the shadows into something almost friendly. Historians say oral tradition was the lifeblood of peasant culture in the Middle Ages, and you believe it. Stories are more than entertainment. They're survival, a way to remember who you are and dream of something better. Some nights, a wandering minstrel or a peddler stops by, bringing news and gossip from the outside world. These visits are rare, but they're a welcome distraction from the sameness of daily life. You listen wide-eyed to stories of distant wars, of markets bustling with goods you've never seen, of cities so big you can't imagine them. For a moment, the world feels larger, and your own troubles a little smaller. Quirky fact: medieval peasants sometimes believed that spirits and elves roamed freely during winter nights, especially around Christmas and the 12 days. There are rules. Don't whistle after dark. Don't leave your shoes by the door. Always throw a crumb to the hearth for the house brownie. You follow these superstitions just in case. After all, in winter, you need all the luck you can get. As the days creep slowly towards spring, you mark the passing of time by the lengthening light. Each extra minute of sun feels like a promise. Eventually, the snow melts, and the first green shoots push through the mud. You know the hardest months are nearly over, but you also know you'll remember these winter nights. The work, the stories, the warmth of family huddled together, for the rest of your life. When the thaw finally comes, it's almost a shock. The world outside your door shifts from white and grey to brown and green, mud replacing ice, and the first hints of grass poking up in the fields. The air, still cold, carries a new scent: damp earth, promise, relief. You open the shutters wider each morning, greedy for the weak sunlight, and watch as the village stirs back to life. Spring doesn't mean the end of hard work. If anything, it's the busiest time of year. But there's a different energy now. The tension of winter survival gives way to hope. Your family moves quickly, cleaning out the byre, patching fences, and preparing the fields for planting. You scatter the last of the stored manure, grateful for every crumb that will help the crops grow. There is no time to rest. The memory of hungry winters drives you on. The animals, too, seem to sense the change. The cows are friskier, calves are born in the straw, and the hens begin laying again. The first eggs of the season are celebrated, shared out carefully among the family. You laugh at the awkward leaps of the lambs, marvel at the stubbornness of the goats, and feel a flicker of pride at your own role in keeping them alive through the cold months. The rhythm of the days changes. You rise with the sun, work until your back aches, and collapse into bed as soon as darkness falls. There is satisfaction in the sweat, in the promise of food growing once more. Your hands are chapped and your feet sore, but you barely notice. The village fields, empty and silent all winter, fill with neighbors turning soil, planting beans and barley, exchanging news and gossip as they work. There are arguments, laughter, even singing. A shared purpose binds everyone together. Quirky fact: in some medieval villages, the first day of ploughing was marked with a celebration called Plough Monday. Children would parade through the streets with ribbons and ploughshares, demanding coins or treats from the grown-ups. You remember last year's revelry: muddy faces, sticky hands, and a rare feeling of abundance. Historians sometimes debate whether peasant life was just endless toil, but you know there are moments of joy too. The first wild herbs gathered from the hedges, the taste of fresh milk, the sudden riot of birdsong in the hedgerows, all these things make the hard work worth it. You treasure the small pleasures, store them up like coins against the next hard season. At home, the talk turns to hopes for the harvest. Your mother worries about late frosts, your father about the cost of seed. You listen, learning to measure the year not in months, but in tasks: planting, weeding, haymaking, harvest, slaughter. The cycle is endless, but it's also what keeps you grounded. As you walk the path to the fields, you see the village children playing, chasing each other with sticks, and laughing in the mud. You remember winter's darkness, and you are glad for the light. Above you, the church bells ring out across the valley, a reminder of faith and community, and you pause for a moment to whisper a prayer. Thanks for having survived the cold and hope for a gentle spring. Another year has begun, and though you know there will be hardships ahead, you face them with the quiet strength that comes from having endured another winter. In the word of the medieval peasant, survival isn't just about food and warmth. It's about resilience, family, and the hope that brighter days are always just around the corner. With spring fully arrived, life in the village picks up a pace that feels almost frantic after the slow, careful days of winter. The sun rises earlier and sets later, stretching the hours of daylight so that every moment can be filled with work, or, when you're lucky, a bit of play. You help your parents sow the fields, each seed pressed into the earth by hand. It's hard, repetitive work, but there's a sense of magic in it, too. Every seed is a promise, a gamble on the weather, luck, and the mercy of God. Your father tells you stories about bad years, when hail or drought ruined the crops, and good years, when the grain was so thick it seemed the fields were made of gold. You listen carefully, knowing that one day, these stories will be yours to pass down. The days blend together, digging, planting, watering, and always watching the sky for signs of rain or frost. The village priest visits the fields to bless the new crops, swinging his censer and chanting prayers. The grown-ups cross themselves, and even the children fall silent for a moment. Whether it's tradition, faith, or just a way to feel less helpless, nobody wants to risk offending the powers that rule the seasons. Historians sometimes argue about how deeply peasants believed in these rituals, but for you, superstition and religion are woven into daily life like the threads in your mother's spinning. You know exactly how many times to turn the bread before baking it, which days are unlucky for planting, and why you must never ever whistle while milking the cows. These rules are as real as the dirt beneath your fingernails. Quirky fact: in some villages, people believe that the first loaf baked from the new wheat should be given to the church or shared with the poorest families, to ensure a good harvest for all. Your mother insists on following this tradition, and you remember the taste of that warm, chewy bread. It's always sweeter after a long, hungry winter. As the season progresses, the work shifts. There are weeds to pull, fences to repair, and animals to tend. The sheep are sheared, their wool washed and set out to dry in the sun. You help your mother card and spin the wool, your hands growing more skilled with every season. There's satisfaction in this work, a sense that you are part of something bigger, an endless chain stretching back through the generations. There are moments of celebration too. May Day comes, and the village gathers to dance around the maypole, sing songs, and crown a May Queen. For one glorious afternoon, work is put aside, and everyone, old and young, joins in the merriment. You eat your fill of bread and cheese, laugh with your friends, and watch the grown-ups relax in a way that's rare and precious. In these moments, you glimpse a different side of peasant life, one that isn't just about survival, but about community, joy, and hope. The hard work of spring lays the foundation for everything that follows, but it's these small celebrations that make the effort worthwhile. As dusk falls on another long day, you sit by the door, tired but content. Your hands are stained with earth, your face warm from the sun, and your heart full of quiet pride. You survived the winter, you welcome the spring, and you are ready for whatever comes next. Summer arrives almost before you realize it. The world suddenly lush and overflowing. The fields you helped sow in the chill of spring are now thick with green barley and oats waving in the breeze, beans curling around their stakes, and patches of vegetables filling the garden behind your house. The days are long and hot, and the work never stops, but there's a vibrancy to everything, a sense that the earth itself is alive and generous. You rise before dawn, sometimes so early that the stars are still visible. There are cows to milk and sheep to check, and then the real labor begins, haymaking. This is one of the most important jobs of the year. The cut grass must be gathered and dried before rain can spoil it, then stacked high in the barn to feed your animals through the next winter. Everyone helps, from the smallest child to the oldest grandparent. You rake, turn, and stack, your arms aching but your heart light. Sometimes you sneak a moment to collapse in the sweet-smelling grass, looking up at the endless sky and daydreaming about what lies beyond your village. Haymaking is hard work, but it's also social. Neighbors help each other, sharing tools, food, and jokes. There's friendly competition to see who can make the neatest herrick or finish a field first. Evenings are spent in laughter and song, the worries of the past winter fading in the golden light. Quirky fact: some villages held hay feasts, when the last load was safely stored with bread, cheese, and ale for everyone. You remember last summer's feast, sticky faces, loud singing, and the rare treat of honey cakes. But summer isn't just about hay. The vegetable garden demands constant attention. You weed and water, chase off birds and rabbits, and help your mother pick beans, peas, and cabbages. Each meal now is fresher and more filling, and you relish the taste of greens after a winter of dried and salted fare. The first ripe berries are a special delight, and you eat as many as you save, juice running down your chin. Life in summer is a balance between work and pleasure. On Sundays and holy days, you might swim or fish in the stream, play games with friends, or listen to minstrels in the village square. There's a festival spirit in the air, even as you prepare for next round of labor. Historians sometimes write about the hungry gap, the time in early summer before the new grain is ready and old stores run thin. You know it well. The anxious days when bread is scarce and every wild herb or egg feels precious. But as the first grains ripen, relief sweeps through the village. The miller's wheel turns again, and the scent of fresh bread drifts from every hearth. There are dangers too. A sudden storm can flatten the crops. A wave of illness can sweep through, carried by heat and flies. Your family keeps a careful eye on the weather, the animals, and one another. You've learned to be grateful for each day that passes without disaster. One evening, as you sit outside with your family, watching the sky turn pink and purple, you hear the distant sound of church bells. It's a reminder to pause, to give thanks for abundance and hope. You breathe in the warm air, feeling the ache in your muscles and the satisfaction of work well done. Summer, for a medieval peasant, is a time of both bounty and burden. The earth gives generously, but only if you labor for it. You fall asleep each night exhausted, but content, dreaming of the harvest still to come. Harvest begins when the grain turns from green to gold, and the whole village feels the tension in the air. This is the moment you've been working toward all year, the difference between a full belly and an empty one when winter comes again. Every able hand is needed in the fields from dawn until the last light fades. You join your family, sickle in hand, moving in a line through the swaying barley. The work is rhythmical and strangely satisfying. Cut, gather, bind, stack. The air is thick with the scent of ripe grain and the wear of insects. Sweat runs down your neck and your arms itchy, but you barely notice. There is no time for rest. Every hour counts, especially if rain threatens. If the weather turns, a whole season's work can be lost in a day. Harvest is a social event as much as a labor. You sing as you work, trading verses with your neighbors. There's a sense of camaraderie, of shared purpose and relief. Children scurry along edges of the fields, gathering stray stalks and chasing after startled birds. Even the village priest comes out to bless the sheaves, waving his hands and chanting prayers for a bountiful harvest. Historians sometimes debate how much grain peasants really kept for themselves and how much went to their allowance, the church, and taxes. You know the truth. After the tithes and dues, there's never quite as much left as you'd like. Still, the sight of the barn filling up with sacks of grain brings a satisfaction nothing else can rival. There will be bread through the winter, maybe even enough for feast days. Quirky fact, it's tradition to leave a corn dolly, or small sheaf standing in the field, an offering to the spirit of the grain. Your mother weaves one every year, tucking it away in the rafters for luck. The work doesn't end with the grain. After the fields are cleared, you move on to beans, peas, and root vegetables. You help your mother dig up onions and leeks, pull carrots, and haul baskets of cabbages to the cellar. The garden is stripped bare, leaving only a few hardy greens to last into winter. Everything is sorted, dried, or salted for storage. You watch, learning how to spot a rotten apple, how to lay a straw to keep potatoes from freezing, how to braid onions for hanging. Once the main harvest is in, there's a period of celebration. The village holds a harvest festival with music, dancing, and the rare treat of roasted meat. You wear your best clothes, patched but clean, and join the others in a circle dance under the stars. For night, worries are set aside. There is laughter, there are stories, and there is hope. But there is also work to be done before winter returns. You help your father repair the roof, ready the barn, and gather firewood. The animals are fattened on the last of the fresh grass. The days grow shorter, and the evenings colder. You feel cycle turning again. As you help your mother lay out the last of the onions in the cellar, she squeezes your hand and smiles. "We've done well this year," she says. You nod, feeling the truth of it deep inside. The labor of spring and summer has paid off, and you face the coming winter with a little less fear. In the life of a medieval peasant, The harvest is both an ending and a beginning. It's the culmination of months of toil and the promise that, at least for now, you have enough. Tomorrow the work will start again. But tonight you rest, grateful and proud, surrounded by the fruits of your labor. As autumn deepens, a quiet settles over the village. The frantic pace of harvest gives way to a slower, more deliberate rhythm. Fields stand empty, but for the stubble of cut grain, and the trees are heavy with apples and nuts. Mist curls along the lanes in the mornings, and the evenings come sooner each day. There is still much to do, but the sense of urgency has changed. Now it's about preparing for the cold, making sure nothing is wasted. You spend your days helping with the final tasks of the season. Apples are gathered and sorted, some stored in straw-lined bins, others pressed into cider. You help your mother strip cabbages for sauerkraut, the sharp scent filling the kitchen. Beans are shelled, herbs are hung to dry, and anything that can be salted or pickled finds its way into a barrel or crock. The cellar and pantry fill up, each shelf a map of the year's work. The animals must be readied too. Flocks are thinned, with the weakest chickens and pigs slaughtered for the winter's meat. You help your father hang hams and sausages from the rafters, their smoky aroma promising hearty meals ahead. The fat is rendered for lard, the skins scraped for leather. Nothing is wasted. Even the bones are saved for broth. Quickie factor in some villages. It's believed that the last apples picked must be left as an offering for the orchard spirit. A small token to ensure next year's trees will bear fruit. Your grandmother always tucks a few apples into hedge at the orchard's edge, humming a tune you don't quite know the words to. Autumn brings more than just chores. It's also a time for fairs and markets. You and your family load a cart with extra onions, wool, and even a barrel of cider to sell in the nearest town. The market is loud and lively, full of strange faces and tempting smells. You marvel at the stalls of pots and cloth, the piles of potted fish, and the rare, extravagant luxury of a honey cake. For a day, you are part of a bigger world, and you return home with stories as precious as any coin. Historians sometimes argue whether medieval peasants ever had time for leisure, but you know that autumn brings its own kind of celebration. As the nights grow longer, your family gathers around the fire, mending clothes, telling stories, and singing the old songs. You play games with your siblings, knucklebones, riddles, or simple tag in the yard before dark. On All Hallows' Eve, you help carve turnips into lanterns and listen wide-eyed to tales of ghosts and wandering spirits. There's still the ever-present work of mending roofs, shoring up the byre, and making sure the firewood pile is high enough. But there is also a sense of accomplishment, a pride in having met the challenges of the year. The larder is full, the barn secure, and your family is together. You feel the cycle of the seasons turning again, winter's shadow lengthening across the land. But you face it with a quiet confidence, knowing you have done all you could to prepare. As you curl up by the fire, listening to the wind outside and the gentle hum of voices within, you know that, whatever the cold months bring, you are ready. For a medieval peasant, autumn is both a reward and a reminder of work well, of nature's generosity and demands, and of the unbroken thread of survival that links one year to the next. As the last leaves fall and the first true frosts silver the grass, you feel the year coming full circle. The world outside grows quieter. Fields lie dormant, trees bare, and the village itself seems to huddle in against the cold. The hustle of autumn gives way to the slower, steadier tasks of winter once again. You know now, more than before, how each season prepares you for the next. The cycle is relentless, yet it brings a kind of comfort. Inside, your home is as ready as you can make it. The rushes have been changed, the cracks in the walls stuffed with straw or rags, and the firewood stacked as high as the doorframe. The first nights are real cold are a testing. Does the roof leak? Will the wind sneak in through the shutters? You and your siblings listen for the ominous drip of water or the sigh of a draught. When all is still, you know your summer and autumn labor have paid off. Life contracts to the warmth of the hearth. Days are shorter, darkness falls before supper, and the world outside becomes mysterious and remote. You help your mother with spinning and weaving by the fire, your father with mending tools and shoes. With the animals close by in the byre, their gentle breathing and the occasional lowing a reminder that you're not alone in braving the cold. Food is simpler now, but more precious. Every slice of bread, every spoonful of dried beans or salted meat is a testament to the work of months. You savor the tang of pickled cabbage, the richness of stew, and the rare treat of honey or dried apples. Each meal is shared and measured, a ritual of gratitude and caution. Quirky fact on the coldest nights, your family sometimes heats stones in the fire and wraps them in cloth to warm the beds. You race to claim the warmest spot, laughing as you slip between rough-lined sheets. It's small comforts like these that make winter bearable. The village, too, has its routines. Neighbors visit more often, bringing news, sharing food, or simply sitting together in the firelight. There's a sense of solidarity, a silent agreement that you'll all see each other through the dark months. Sometimes the priest comes by with words of comfort, or a traveling peddler brings tales from the wider world. You listen, hungry for stories and distraction. Historians may debate the poverty and hardship of medieval peasant life, but you know it's also filled with moments of warmth and community. Winter is hard, yes, but it's also a season of togetherness, storytelling, and hope. You mark the shortest day with a simple feast. Extra bread, a bit of cheese, maybe a cooked apple or two. The old ones say that from this day, the light will grow and spring will come again. You believe them, because you have to. The memory of green fields and long summer days is enough to carry you through. As you settle into the rhythm of winter, you realize you are part of something ancient and enduring. The turning of the seasons, the work and the rest, the fear and the joy, all of it is woven together, year after year. And as you close your eyes, safe and warm for another night, you know you'll be ready to begin again when the world wakes up. Winter deepens and the days blend into one another. Dark, cold, quiet. Outside, the land is frozen and still. Inside, life is measured by the warmth of the fire and the slow, steady passage of time. You learn to read the world by smaller signs, the way the frost creeps across the window, the creak of the rafters in the night, the gentle rise and fall of your family's breathing as you all sleep close together. The long nights are filled with stories. Every family has their favorites. The tale of the clever fox who outwitted the Lord's dogs, the saint who saved a village from famine, the mysterious lights that sometimes flicker in the woods. You listen, eyes wide, letting the words carry you beyond the boundaries of your home. Sometimes your grandmother tells stories of her own childhood, or even her grandmother's, and you realize with a shiver that you are part of a line stretching back farther than you can imagine. When the weather allows, you venture outside to help with winter chores. You break the ice in the animals' water troughs, check the thatch on the roof, and help gather deadwood from the hedges. Some days, you travel with your father to the woods to collect firewood, trudging through snow, your breath steaming in the air. It's hard work, but the cold keeps you moving, and you always return home with a sense of accomplishment. Quirky facty, in some parts of Europe, villagers believe that whistling or singing while gathering firewood would drive away mischievous spirits. So you and your siblings sing loudly, turning labor into a game. There are days when illness creeps into the household, a cough that won't go away, a fever that keeps someone in bed. These are the hardest times, when you feel how fragile life can be. Your mother makes herbal teas, your father offers prayers, and everyone does what they can. Sometimes the priest visits with holy water. Sometimes a neighbor brings broth or a charm said to ward off sickness. You learn that surviving winter is about more than just food and warmth. It's about caring for each other, sharing what you have, and never giving in to despair. Despite everything, there are moments of joy. On feast days, your family shares what little you've saved up. A special loaf of bread, a bit of smoked meat, a mug of cider. You play games, sing songs, and let yourself forget the cold for a while. The darkness outside makes the candlelight inside seem brighter, the laughter louder, the love warmer. Historians sometimes write about the dead season, when work slows and hunger grows. But you know it's also a time for imagination, for dreams, for remembering what you're working toward. Each evening, as you drift to sleep listening to the wind in the eaves, you hold onto the memory of sunlight and green fields. You trust that, hidden beneath the snow, life is waiting to return. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the days begin to lengthen. The air smells different, fresher with a hint of thaw. You notice it first when the morning light comes a little earlier, when a trickle of water runs beneath the ice, when the hens start to lay again. There's excitement in the air, a sense of anticipation. Spring is coming. You survived another winter. The first true days of spring feel almost miraculous. You wake and the pale light is just a little stronger. The air, still sharp, now carries a scent of damp earth and growing things, so subtle at first that you half think you've imagined it. But one morning, you see it, the tiniest green shoot breaking through the mud outside your door. The mood in your home shifts as quickly as the season. Your mother opens the shutters a little wider to welcome in the weak sunlight. Your father inspects the tools, sharpening blades and mending handles, readying them for the work ahead. You and your siblings are sent to check the byre, searching for the first signs of lambs or calves. The animals, restless after months inside, begin to venture out, noses twitching at the promise of fresh grass. There's still a chill in the mornings, but the days stretch longer, and the sun climbs higher. Everyone in the village feels it, the weight of winter lifting, the hope that comes with a new beginning. The first tasks are always the same: clearing out the old, making way for the new. You help sweep the house, tossing out the spent rushes, scrubbing soot from the hearth. Outside, you gather fallen branches, pick over the last stores in the cellar, and search for anything that might have survived the cold. Quirky fact: the first wild herbs of spring, nettle, sorrel, chickweed, are gathered eagerly, both for food and as a tonic after the long winter. Your mother makes a soup of them, and you eat it hungrily, grateful for something fresh and green. There's a sense of community renewal, too. Neighbors greet each other with real smiles, sharing news of the first eggs, the earliest blossoms, or the survival of a sickly lamb. The village comes together to repair what's been broken: fences, footpaths, even the church roof, if it's been battered by storms. Children run and shout again, their games echoing the joy of survival. Historians sometimes debate how free a peasant's life really was, bound by duties and seasons. But you know that, in these moments, there's a freedom in hope itself, the sense that, no matter how hard the winter, spring will always come. Your family marks the change with small rituals. Your grandmother sprinkles salt at the doorstep to ward off lingering evil spirits. Your father plants the first seeds in the garden with a whispered prayer. You help your mother hang laundry outside for the first time in months, watching it flutter in the breeze. Small, ordinary victory over the cold. The work ahead is daunting: fields to plow, seeds to sow, animals to graze and tend. But for now, you savor the simple joys of sun on your face, the taste of wild greens, the laughter of your family. You know that the cycle is beginning again, that you are part of something both ancient and new. As you stand at the edge of the field, looking out at the land that has shaped your life, you feel a deep, quiet pride. You have endured the darkness and the cold. You are ready for the work and the hope of another year. And as the bells ring out across the valley, calling everyone to the first service of spring, you take your place with your family, grateful for the chance to begin again. The days grow busier as spring strengthens its hold. Each week brings new signs of life: buds swelling on the trees, birds building nests under the eaves, tiny frogs hopping through the damp grass. You wake each morning to a chorus of birdsong, and the light that spills through the window is golden, not grey. The village is alive with activity. Men and women work side by side in the fields, turning the soil with heavy wooden plows, tossing stones and roots into piles at the edge. You help where you can, picking up rocks, guiding the oxen, or fetching water for the tired workers. The air is filled with the rich, earthy scent of freshly turned ground. It clings to your hands and clothes, a reminder that everything begins here. Children, too young for the heaviest tasks, are given jobs of their own. You guard the planted fields from crows and other hungry animals, waving sticks and shouting when they get too close. You collect eggs, search for edible herbs, and help your mother weed the kitchen garden. Every task, no matter how small, matters. Quirky fact: in some villages, the first plough furrow of the year was sprinkled with oil or milk as an offering to the land spirits. Your father lets you pour this year. He says it's for luck, but you know it's also a sign that you're growing up. There are moments of rest too. After a morning of hard work, you share a simple meal with your family. Bread, cheese, maybe a few early peas or a boiled egg. You eat outside, sitting on the grass, grateful for the sun and the company. Laughter comes easily now, the shadows of winter fading with each passing day. Historians sometimes overlook these small joys, focusing on hardship and toil. But you know that a peasant's life, while never easy, is full of moments when the beauty of the world cuts through the struggle. A patch of violets in the grass, a bird's nest hidden in the hedge, the taste of the first wild strawberries. These are treasures, as precious as gold. As the weeks pass, the rhythm of the year reasserts itself. The garden fills with green, the fields are planted, and the animals grow fat on new grass. The village holds a small festival to celebrate the planting. There is singing, dancing, and a procession to bless the fields. You join in, your heart light with hope. Your family's stories expand with new memories. Of a calf born healthy, of a field well sown, of a storm that passed without harm. You begin to understand how these stories knit your family and your village together, linking you to the generations that came before and the ones that will come after. As evening falls, you look out at the fields and the low golden light. The air smells of earth and promise. You are tired, but it's the good kind of tired earned by honest work and shared effort. You know that challenges will come again: drought, sickness, storms, hunger. But tonight, you rest easy, believing in the cycle, in your family, and in the quiet hope that if you keep working and caring, you will always find your way through. As spring gives way to early summer, the village settles into its steady, ancient rhythm. Every day is full, but the burdens feel lighter now, carried on the shoulders of many. The air warms, the sun climbs higher, and the world seems to swell with possibility. You feel it in your bones. The excitement of growth, of becoming, of another cycle well underway. The kitchen garden is a riot of green. You help your mother pick lettuce and radishes for supper, your fingers brushing the cool, damp soil. The first strawberries are ripe, and you sneak a few before the basket is full, the sweet juice staining your lips. Meals are brighter, more varied, and everyone's spirits rise with the bounty. Out in the fields, the crops push skyward. You and your siblings are sent to weed the barley and oats, your backs bent, hands quick and sure. The work is hard, but the land feels alive beneath your feet. When you pause to stretch, you catch glimpses of deer in the distant woods and hawks circling in the bright sky. You learn the names of every weed and wildflower, every bird and bug. The world is bigger than you thought, but also more familiar. Quirky fact: some villagers believe that singing to the fields the crops grow strong. Your family's favorite is a simple, cheerful tune, and you belt it out as you work, your laughter mingling with the birdsong. There's time for fun, too. On warm afternoons, you race your friends to the stream, splashing in the cold water until your toes are numb. You help build little boats from twigs and leaves, sending them spinning downstream and cheering as they disappear around the bend. Sometimes, the village gathers for games: wrestling, sack races, or simple ball games played on the green. The grown-ups watch, smiling, and for a while, worries are forgotten. Historians may argue about the hardship of peasant life, but you know there's more to it than hunger and toil. There is also laughter, wonder, and the deep satisfaction of belonging. You see it in your father's steady hands as he sharpens his scythe, in your mother's gentle touch as she braids your sister's hair, in the way your neighbors greet you at dawn. As the days grow longer, you begin to look ahead. The hayfields will soon be ready, and there is talk of when to begin the cutting. You listen to plans for the midsummer festival, the songs that will be sung, the special treats to be prepared, the games to be played late into the evening. There's a feeling the air: anticipation, hope, and gratitude. You realize, now, that every season teaches you something new. Winter taught you endurance and the warmth of family, spring, the thrill of renewal, summer, the joy of abundance and community. Every cycle weaves you deeper into the fabric of your village, your family, your land. One evening, as the sun sets in a blaze of orange and gold, you sit with your family outside your home. The fields stretch before you, green and full of promise. The work of today is done, and tomorrow will bring more. But tonight, you rest, contentful and deeply grateful. In the world of the medieval peasant, life is never easy, but it is rich in ways that matter most. You have learned to endure, to celebrate, to hope. And as you close your eyes beneath the vast, star-strewn sky, you know you are ready for whatever comes next.